This episode is brought to you by Honda. When you test drive the all-new Prologue EV, there's a lot that can impress you about it. There's the class-leading passenger space, the clean, thoughtful design, and the intuitive technology. But out of everything, what you'll really love most is that it's a Honda. Visit honda.com/EV to see offers.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See detail.
George Clooney and Brad Pitt's new movie Wolves is on Apple TV Plus September 27th.
That's where I want you to be now.
So if you want to see George Clooney and Brad Pitt, go to Apple TV Plus.
You got to start the story there.
Or if you want to see Brad Pitt and George Clooney, go to Apple TV Plus.
I am enjoying the show.
And if you want to see their new movie Wolves,
You can't do it, I'm going to help you out. I can do it, so do it.
definitely go to Apple TV Plus.
Admit it, it's cool. Okay, fine, it was very cool.
Wolves, streaming September 27th on Apple TV Plus. Rated R.
Hello and welcome to our final podcast about this year's 100. After some fantastic conversations with players like Grace Ballinger and Katie Levick in our previous episodes, I'm delighted to have Rosa Simkin of Rosa Talks Ball back on the show. Today she'll be reflecting on what many are calling the best ever women's competition. This season we saw the Braves bubble burst, the fire really take off, and the spirit sparkle at the home of cricket Lords. Rosa will be sharing her candid opinions on the winners, the losers, and everything in between. She'll also be revealing her team of the tournament, the standout players who truly made an impact this year. And with the Women's T20 World Cup fast approaching in early October, Rosa will give us her predictions on who she thinks will lift the global trophy. Stay tuned for what promises to be a packed and exciting episode. Hello, Rosa. Welcome back to the Paddock and the Pavilion.
Hello. Thank you for having me back on.
Yes, it's time to look back at the 100, especially the Women's 100, a follow-up to our episode 278. And during the 100, we had sunshine. We had new winners of the women's tournament where we saw record crowds, lower scores. We had 2 ties, and you were very busy.
Yeah, it's been a hectic one. Covered all 8 teams at 4 of the grounds. And yeah, it's been very fulfilling. Lots of fun interviews with some incredible overseas players who you wouldn't even dream of having chats with. And I bumped into you a couple of times too.
I did. I bumped into you at Trent Bridge a couple of times, didn't I?
You did indeed. So yeah, it's been a busy one. The final weekend was particularly hectic. 2 days in London, back to back, going there, going back. But it was lots of fun and a great thing to be a part of.
Yes, it was great being part of the media group. I mean, I got to briefly interview Elise Perry at Lords, which was a great pleasure, and also Sarah Glenn. And you must have interviewed lots more than that.
Yeah, I think I did about 15 interviews over the length of the tournament. Some highlights, probably Elise Perry, Tammy Beaumont, Hayley Matthews, Ash Gardner, Nasa Brunt, some top stars, and then also some domestic ones too. And it's really nice to be able to highlight both in a media quantity because it's the first proper tournament which I've had the privilege of holding accreditation for. So definitely wanted to take advantage of that as much as possible.
You certainly get a good view at Lords and Trent Bridge where I went to watch 100 matches.
Yeah, you do. I think the media centres really vary. But the ones I spent time with at this summer were lovely. Trent Bridge and the Oval, Lords and Edgbaston, so mainly the central ones. But thankfully, due to the scheduling, I did get to cover all 8 of the teams in some sort of capacity.
And the media managers were wonderful, really helpful when I got there.
Yeah, they're really good. They're always really understanding and very accepting as well, I think. So they deal with a whole different range of people, yet they don't really bat an eyelid. So definitely having them in the press boxes is quite reassuring for everyone involved.
Well, we've got lots to cover. We're going to hear more about your predictions, how they went, your team of the tournament. We're going to talk about the crowds, briefly about the men's tournament. But to start with, what are your initial thoughts? Now, it must be about a month ago, about the 100 2024.
I mean, what a tournament of cricket. It's probably the best it's been from a competitive point of view for the women. We've had shock results all over. We've had the Southern Brave, who've been completely dominant for all 3 years running of the tournament, placed last with only one win, which is staggering for anyone looking from outside perspective who hasn't followed the tournament. But it's been incredible. It's been competitive. The regional players have shined. There's been young talent. The England stars have done very well, which is probably exactly what you want heading into a World Cup. And there's also been some incredible contributions from the top international players in the world of cricket. So I think it's been my favourite year yet, and I think it's showing the positive direction that we're going in with women's cricket in this country.
Talking about the Brave, must mention them then. You said in episode 278, they are going to be up there again.
I don't think anyone could have quite predicted what went on with Southern Brave. It was a shock. I mean, Charlotte Edwards as a coach has been so incredibly dominant in every single team she's been a part of over the last few years. But I was saying recently that I think she didn't recruit very well. And when you look at the team after the tournament and you look at who they were relying on, Smriti Mandana has been very key for them over the opening few years of the tournament, and she was unavailable for the majority of it for the Asia Cup. And then you're expecting her to come in from completely different conditions and be able to open for you and score a load of runs, and it just didn't happen. The balance of the squad was off, and quite frankly, I think Charlotte Edwards is starting to be found out.
Well, they finished bottom, 1 win, 1 tie. They'll be first choice in the draft next year.
Yeah, they will be. I mean, if I was them, I'd be looking to massively change my squad. I think they've got some real talent now. So you've got England's Danny Wyatt, Maya Bouchier, you've got Lauren Bell, you've got Smriti Mandana, Chloe Tryon. But I think from a domestic point of view, they recruited poorly. They only made 2 changes in the tournament. And both of those were forced when players were ruled out with injury or when players had to leave to let another international player come in. They didn't use 3 of their domestic players which sat on their bench. And in a franchise tournament, when you're bottom of the table, you would expect a side to make those changes to try and get your foot in the door, because once you start losing, it's so difficult to start winning. So from a recruitment point of view, that first choice in the draft could be crucial for Charlotte Edwards.
Let's move on to the winners of the tournament, the London Spirit, who beat your team, the Welsh Fire, on the 18th of August by 4 wickets with 2 balls to spare. But before I hear your thoughts, let's get a reaction from a guest I had on my latest podcast, episode 286, Katie Levick of the Birmingham Phoenix. And this is what Katie had to say. Were you surprised with the London Spirit winning the tournament?
Maybe not surprised. I think the first game they played and won when they chased down, I think it was about 170 against the Brave.
Against the Brave, yeah.
Yeah, that was a real marker that they were competitors this year. And then just with the way that the 100 ebbed and flowed and everyone seemed to beat everyone, you couldn't necessarily know who was going to go all the way, but you knew they had all the right elements. I think when Deepti Sharma joined them, she was one of the overseas picks of the tournament for me. To have someone that contributes with bat ball and in the field every single game is massive. And she was brilliant for them. I probably thought heading into finals weekend it was Welsh Fires to win, but I wasn't surprised at all that when it was a Spirit Fire final, and it was such a good competition that it wasn't a given conclusion, a foregone conclusion about who was going to win. So I think that was exciting for the neutral spectator to watch, so you didn't know which way it was going to go in that final.
Rosa, you did say in episode 278 that the London Spirit would make the top 3.
I genuinely could not recall my prediction, so I'm really glad that I predicted that the champions would make the top Agree. But they had quite an incredible season. I mean, as Katie said, that opening game really put them on the front foot. And an already strong squad, the addition of Sharma halfway through really boosted their chances and helped them not only get through that eliminator against the Oval Invincibles, but reach that final and then, of course, go on and win it.
Yeah, Deepti Sharma, 212 runs and 8 wickets.
Yeah, she's quite some player. Probably is the most popular in these parts still after the incident in 2022. But I think we should really be looking past that now. And she's an incredible cricketer. She is becoming very quickly one of the best in the world and one of the most sought after when it comes to franchise tournaments. And to think she was an injury replacement for Grace Harris, who pulled out just before the tournament started. So she didn't have a contract. And she was in the Phoenix squad, I think in 2022, and didn't play a game. So to show her progression in the eyes of selectors over the last few years, it's been quite dramatic. And that is because she constantly does contribute at the high stage.
One batter that did contribute and wicketkeeper was Georgia Redmayne.
Georgia Redmayne was unbelievable this tournament. Obviously, she has been in the UK beforehand, playing with the South East Stars at the Oval. So she had already had a taster for the conditions of the game over here and also a lot of the bowlers which she came up against in the 100. But she really shone, both with gloves in hand and bat in hand. Constantly a presence within the side who led them to competitive totals. I think she was player of the match in both the eliminator and the final, which is quite some fate. She was probably not your immediate pickup as an Aussie player, as someone who's not really made a stance in the international setup, but she really, really stood out this tournament.
As did the skipper of the London Spirit, the England captain, Heather Knight, second in the run charts with 271 runs.
Yeah, I think that's really reassuring. I think Heather has obviously been at the top of the English game for a number of years now, but owing to injury and I think scheduling hasn't really had the chance to show what she can do in the 100. And from a confidence point of view, heading into the World Cup next month, it really boosts her. It boosts the side, and it probably boosts the confidence of spectators knowing that the captain is firing and scoring runs consistently.
The Spirit only scraped through, really, to get into the eliminator because they had 4 wins, 3 defeats, and it was that remarkable tie they had against the Oval Invincibles that effectively got them through.
Yeah, I mean, it was a competitive season. I mean, when we went into the last round of fixtures, I think there were still 5 or 6 teams which could have qualified if other results went their way, etc. And it's never really been like that previously. We've known who was going to be in the final ages in advance and the eliminator ages in advance. And that's what you need. You need the competitive nature to make spectators continue wanting to show up and support their sides.
The side you were supporting, the Welsh Fire, they fired again.
I mean, I told you they would. They have an unbelievable squad. I mean, when you look at the international lineup of Hayley Matthews, Shabnam Ismail and Jess Jonathan, 3 of the greatest players in the history of international cricket. You've got Tammy Beaumont at the head. You've got Sophia Dunkley. And then you've got some real domestic talent as well in there. The squad is balanced, which in this tournament I think is surprisingly rare. And it means that they can call on all of the players within their squad. And they really did. The rotation they had to do and the rotation they chose to do worked perfectly. And I think it says a lot about not underestimating local talent when formulating these squads for the tournaments.
Third time lucky with your prediction for 2025 then?
Oh, maybe. I feel like there are a couple other teams who are really in it now. I mean, as I said, the competitive nature has just grown dramatically. Southern Brave will be back into the mix next year because they'll come back with a vengeance. Birmingham Phoenix and Northern Superchargers looked really promising at times. So I don't know yet. You'll have to get back to me on that one when we know a little bit more about the squads.
Well, let's find out a bit more about the Birmingham Phoenix and the Northern Superchargers. Firstly, your team or your local team, the Birmingham Phoenix, because In my recent podcast, I spoke to Katie Levick, and the leg spinner at the Birmingham Phoenix told me about their campaign. And this is what Katie had to say.
Yeah, it's so funny when the final standings end as they did. It doesn't feel like we had a seventh campaign. It was only the game before that we were out of the running. And then we got rained off, unfortunately, in the last game. And I think we were on good standing to put on a really good total in that game and probably pick up a win. But that's how tournament competitions go. And there's so few games, one result affects the league standings so massively. We got a good couple of wins in. We beat Welsh Fire, who went on to the final, and we took all of our losses, bar probably one, really down to the wire. So we played some really good cricket. So it's not too disappointing campaign to say we did come seventh.
As you say, there was very little between all the teams. Birmingham Phoenix came seventh with 7 points, and London Spirit, who the eventual winners, were third with 9 in the group.
I mean, yeah, as I've said, the competitiveness of the tournament has increased massively over the past few years. And for Birmingham Phoenix, they did really well. And I know that sounds baffling given they placed 7th, but when you look at the gaps in between the teams, they're very minimal. And I think the thing which impressed me most is obviously they hadn't won a game since their second to last game in 2022. They didn't win any games in 2023. And then they went on to lose their first game this season very dramatically against the Invincibles. And then they lost their next against the London Spirit. So from a team morale perspective, Elise Perry and Ben Sawyer did an incredible job to keep their minute mentally. Because as I've said, in franchise tournaments, when things aren't going your way, it's really hard to gain momentum and play positive cricket. But they did start to play positive cricket. They won 2 on the bounce and then kind of lost their momentum again. But there was a phase where if they'd won their second to last game and the last one wasn't rained off, they would have qualified.
So you definitely feel they're making progress.
Significantly, I think Elise Perry as captain has made a massive difference to that side. The experience she's brought has been pivotal. If I'm entirely honest, I can't see head coach Ben Sawyer being kept on next season. He was on a 2-year contract, so it's now up. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with him. But if they can recruit well in the draft in a couple of areas which they're lacking a bit, then I genuinely think they could be very successful next year.
Let's move on then to the Northern Superchargers. And I spoke to Grace Ballinger, one of their opening bowlers, and let's hear what Grace had to say about their campaign.
Yeah, definitely disappointing. To be perfectly honest, I think we were surprised to not qualify in the end. We had a good run where we went 3 games from 3 and looked pretty much unbeatable in my opinion, and then ended up losing our last 2. So kind of threw it away ourselves in a way. But yeah, as I said, that's the way that franchise cricket can go, and it's about what teams are in form and what players are in form. And unfortunately, we just couldn't get over the line in those last couple of games. Yeah,
winning those 3 games on the trot, which were your 3rd, 4th and 5th games, you were then in a good position to be in the top 3, weren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we had a really good bit of momentum there, and then unfortunately our game at Sophia Gardens got rained off. So us and Welsh Fire took a point each, but it was still very much in our own hands. We just had to win one of the last 2 games, and we came across Beth Mooney in pretty good form against Manchester. She got 99 out against us, which she's obviously very capable of, and it was just unfortunately came up against us.
Yes, Rosa, if they'd have won that tie, which they should have won against the Brave, they could have gone very close.
I mean, it was completely in their hands, so they should have qualified in reality. I think their squad balance was completely wrong this tournament. They were relying massively on their overseas talent, which obviously you're always going to hope your overseas talent does well in franchise tournaments, but the hope is that they're backed up by the local crop. Kate Cross was batting somewhere ridiculous, like 8 in the order, and she is definitely a number 11. So when you consider that and you consider the players coming after her and their batting ability, they were relying so heavily on that top 3 to get them going positively, and it just didn't happen. Marie Kelly and Davina Perrin were swapped in and out at the opener position. They both really struggled to form. So I think they're a side who, again, have a lot of potential, but just aren't showing it based on the players that are available to them.
They did have the leading bowler in Lindsay Smith with 15 wickets.
Yeah, they did indeed. But Lindsay is consistent. I think no matter what team she was a part of, based on the conditions this season, she was always going to be up there. And again, I think that really highlights how much they were reliant on certain players, because they also had the MVP, Annabelle Sutherland, in their ranks. So if you've got these two players who have performed miles above everyone else in your squad, yet the rest of your squad still aren't able to pull you up and give you consistent performances, I think that shows a genuine issue.
Yeah, considering those two sort of facts you've mentioned, they really ought to be in the top three if you've got the top bowler and the MVP in the tournament.
Yeah, exactly. And I think particularly given that they made the final last year and their squad wasn't massively different, so you would expect that side to compete. But the key difference for me was, again, the domestic players which they brought in and how they used them. I think most of the teams have reached a point where they are relying on their domestic talent more and more, but I don't think the balance is right at Superchargers, and I think they're underestimating the ability of the players which they've got in their side who play consistent cricket at a regional level but haven't yet done it at a franchise level. Sometimes you have to, in these tournaments, give a little bit of faith in them, which they just didn't do, and it cost them.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
Looking for excitement? Chumba Casino is here. Play anytime, play anywhere. Play on the train, play at the store, play at home, play when you're bored. Play today for your chance to win and get daily bonuses when you log in. So what are you waiting for? Don't delay. Chumba Casino is free to play.
Experience social gameplay like never before. Go to Chumba Casino right now to play hundreds of games, including online slots, bingo, Slingo, and more. Live the Chumba life at ChumbaCasino.com. VGW Group. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
We've missed out two teams, the Trent Rockets, who came fifth, and the Manchester Originals, who came sixth. What are your thoughts on their two campaigns?
I'm going to be honest, the Manchester Originals really disappointed me this year. I thought they were incredibly inconsistent, and I thought that given the players that they had in their squad, you've got the best bowler in the world in Sophie Eccleston, one of the best wicket keepers in the country in Eddie Falcaud, and then some of the best international players out there, including Beth Mooney. You should be up there in franchise tournaments when you've got a squad which is that talented, and they just weren't. And I think the leadership is where they really went wrong. I really rate Sophie Eccleston as a player. I think she's a phenomenal cricketer and she is one of the best in the world, but I don't think she's proven why she's holding that captaincy in recent years. She's a little bit clueless, and yes, that's experience, but also that's, do you really want your best player in the squad focusing on captaining, or do you want the best player in your squad focusing on firing? Because she's never, in a Manchester Original shirt, performed, and that's very unlike her. She's usually top wicket taker in everything she takes part in. From a Trent Rockets point of view, I think they did really well. I think the balance of their squad was incredible. They had an absolute powerhouse of an opening order. Bryony Smith, Grace Scrivens, Natson Brunt, Ash Gardner, Heather Graham and Alana King and Katie George backing it up. The reliance on young bowlers mixed in with the experience of the older bowlers, it all worked. I just think they had a really unlucky spell where they were on the wrong end of about 3 close results in a row, and that just killed them from a momentum perspective. But they are up there next year for me if they can retain the majority of the players they've got this year.
They did have the leading run scorer in the women's tournament in Nat Sibber-Brunt, over 300 runs.
I mean, is anybody surprised? Nat Sibber-Brunt makes cricket look painfully easy in ways which I can't even describe. She's always going to be consistent, but it's really convincing to see her that consistent whilst captaining, because I think she's sometimes struggled to balance the two, ball aside. And also with ball in hand as well, she did make a difference. I don't think she's back to her best yet with ball following injury, but she's the ultimate all-rounder, and there's a reason that she is probably the most sought-after player in global cricket.
Just ending our talk then on the fourth 100 tournament, how do you think it compares cricket-wise to the other three?
In terms of
just the cricket, the standard of the cricket, was it as good this time as last time? I know in our previous podcast, you thought that 2022 was the best year.
I've been really impressed this year. Much better than last year, standard-wise. I think from a totals perspective, they've been a little bit lower, but I don't think that's been down to the talent on show. I think that's been down to the conditions. I mean, if you look at the top wicket takers, most of them are spin bowlers, and that's very unusual in women's cricket. And it tends to give a hint that, were the wickets a little bit on the less reliable side? And some of them were. But the standard of cricket has genuinely amazed me this tournament. It's been a balance of England players, of international players, of young talent and regional talent. And that's exactly how it should be in our prime franchise tournament.
During the 100, I had the chance to speak with several spectators ahead of the match at Lord's between the London Spirit and Birmingham Phoenix to get their thoughts on the tournament. Here's what they had to say.
I like coming to the 100 because it's just quick and it's fast paced, and I just like seeing all the sixes and fours.
So what do you like about the 100?
I just like it's fast, it's quick. It brings on the women's game, which has come a long way since the days of 3 or 4 years ago. It's basically what it's done for the women's game, which I find a very positive force.
You like 2 games in a day?
I do like 2 games in a day, yes.
Yeah.
I just wish it would be the men's first and the women's after, because it's a lot easier to get the men's autographs at the start.
So what brings you to Lord's today?
Well, I felt it was a good way to introduce my daughter to cricket. She'd not been to see a game before in real life, a professional game. I've been with my dad and I've been to Edgbaston and things like that to watch test matches and things. But for my daughter, she's learning to play at school, and it's a great way to see and get enthused in cricket.
And you go to test matches and county matches?
Yeah, well, county matches not so much. I'm a TV media follower, but on occasion I've been to, in fact, was there in Edgbaston and things, and it just I prefer the England matches, but I felt the 100 was a great way to get sort of family. It was a family orientated kind of set up, and I felt it was the best way to introduce my daughter to it.
So why have you come to the 100 today?
Well, I've been getting into cricket recently, being for my school squad and stuff. So I wanted to come see some really good players.
So you enjoy cricket?
Yes, I do. Well, I was our team captain, but mainly I bowl.
But you're looking forward to coming to a 100 game. You've obviously watched it on the television.
Yes, I watched the last one with the Birmingham Phoenix in the ovals. So I think it looks really fun. A good way to play cricket.
Rosa, I was reading that of the ticket sales for the 100, 41% were families and 30% were people new to cricket. That strikes a chord with some of the people I've just spoken to.
I mean, it's so crucial in an era where we're still responding to quite a damning ICC report into cricket and the inaccessibility of it. The 100 has been transformative in terms of getting all demographics in to watch cricket at the highest level. And it's how it should be. You should have diverse crowds. You should have people of all backgrounds wanting to come and watch cricket. The prices, I think, of the tickets help that. You've got all the different price brands, but at some of the grounds, the tickets start at £10, which in comparison to Blaster games is rather significant, and it makes it easier to rock up and go and have a fun day at the cricket. And I think, especially in terms of introducing kids to the game, when you go to training sessions at local clubs and you see these young kids in the nets, so many of them now are wearing all these different 100 shirts with different men's and women's players' names on the back, and that's so refreshing.
22,000 people at the final, the women's final, record crowd for a women's match in this country?
I mean, yeah, from my perspective, as someone who has covered and watched women's cricket for a number of years and been the only one at games at times who hasn't been family, it's incredible. And it genuinely is transformative for these players, the internationals, and also these young stars to be able to show what they can do in front of the biggest audiences at the best grounds in the country, and especially Lord's, one of the best in the world. You know, it's one of the reasons why I love the tournament so much. We had records at 7 of the 8 grounds, attendance-wise. And I really hope that we can start to translate that into the women's domestic game, because we are still in a position in domestic cricket where you're lucky to get 100 in. So it's about how we translate that, but it's also about celebrating the achievements and what the 100 has done.
Just on talking about that, what would you do to try and attract more people to domestic matches?
Change the order of the tournaments. I think that's a massive thing for me. After the 100, we go back into 50 over cricket, which if you're trying to draw people into women's cricket just does not make sense. Have the 50 over tournament done earlier on in the season, have the T20 tournament starting before the 100 and then finishing afterwards with the finals day. Maybe have both the Blast and women's T20 finals day at Edgbaston, potentially on the same weekend or the week after each other, so that you could have the men's first and then you could be like presenting the women's one on the same level. But I think the biggest thing is marketing. I mean, how often do you see the men's counties posting about their region's games at their grounds and actively trying to get people in to watch them? How often do you receive emails from the ECB, from the counties which you're a part of, which say, we have Sunrisers playing here, we have the Central Sparks playing here, come and watch. So with next year, the game being handed back to the counties, that is going to be crucial.
What's wonderful about the 100 is the engagement between the players after the match, signing autographs and being so easily accessible to the media.
I mean, it's genuinely inspiring for young kids to be able to go to games and get the autographs of Ben Duckett and Elise Perry. You know, it's not really something you experience in men's cricket as much, apart from during the 100. In women's cricket, the players are always very happy to spend time with the fans, but they don't usually get the opportunity to because of the demographic of their games. So I think it's transformative for the people watching, and also rather transformative for the regional players involved in the 100 to know that the cricket they are playing is being received and is inspiring.
Well, long may that continue. It's certainly, I think youngsters are going to games of cricket. They're not going to a men's and women's match. They're just going to watch the Birmingham Phoenix or the Trent Rockets or the London Spirit.
Definitely. And in terms of the attitude towards the women's game and bringing the next generation into it, that's exactly how it should be. It is just a day at the cricket. There's no major differences between the men's and women's tournaments apart from maybe the totals. But that wasn't the case this year, particularly given how much the men struggled with bat in hand. But it's so important to just advertise it as cricket, because at the end of the day, that's what it is.
Yeah, we even had a men's match where Dan Worrell bowled the first 10 balls and didn't concede a run. So
it's rather baffling that when you think about it, isn't it? In a white ball, shortest format of the game, franchise tournament, which are constantly hailed as being a bowler's worst nightmare. Oh, just a double maiden, thanks.
Well, it was the worst nightmare for Rashid Khan when Kieran Pollard hit him for 5 sixes in a row in one set.
Yeah, the two extremes, that, isn't it? But I think, luckily, it was a very experienced international player. So from his point of view, he knows how to come back from that. I think if it was one of the young players, it would be a very different story. But that shows the quality of both the bowlers and the batters, which do come to the 100.
Let's move on to your predictions. I haven't forgotten them, where top batter was going to be Holly Armitage.
Yeah, that didn't go very well, did it?
61 runs.
Sorry about that, Holly, because I think I've genuinely cursed you there. Look, I think from my perspective, she's had a great season everywhere else. In my defence, I think she just really struggled against the quality of bowlers on show. She was put in some difficult situations by her teammates at times, was caught at the wrong end and run out. That's probably not my finest hour from a prediction point of view, but hopefully I'm about to make a comeback.
Your top bowler, you did get Amanda Jade Wellington. She was 11th in the bowling charts with 10 wickets.
I'll take that. That's better than Holly. Well, given how consistent the bowlers were this year and how many of them were close to each other in those bowling rankings, I will take 11th.
Your player to look out for was Tilly Courtine-Coleman. She got 6 wickets, and I think people would agree that she did have a good tournament despite the Brave coming last.
100%. She also got some massive scalps of some top players, and she's 16 years old. I mean, that's baffling to think about, and you're being thrown in at the deep end. You've only really made your professional debut a couple of months before, and you're told, okay, here's the ball. You're going to bowl in the power play in front of 10,000 people live on Sky Sports. So for her to compose herself as well as she did and perform and bowl economically, I think that's the biggest thing. Says a lot about her, and she's definitely one to keep an eye on in the years to come.
You are listening to the Paddock and the Pavilion with Stephen Wallace, possibly the only podcast that covers both horse racing and cricket. Don't forget you can explore our full archive of shows on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, and on our YouTube channel. Now let's get back to Rosa to find out her team of the tournament. Now, I sent you a question earlier. You were going to let us know your team of the tournament.
This was really hard. And I've genuinely never had as much difficulty putting a team together as I did this one. And there were a few fringe players. So I've got my 11 and then a bench with a few who deserve mentions but aren't quite
So you've
there.
got a squad, are you? Yeah. So are you going to be like some of the teams that actually use the squad, or like the Southern Brave and just use the 11?
I'm a firm believer in if you're good enough to be involved in the tournament and my side, you're good enough to be on the pitch. So, think about rotation, not only on the bench, but also in the batting order. Because there are some questionable batters coming in very late on here. But we're starting with my 2 openers, Georgia Redmayne of London Spirit, who's also going to be wicket-keeping, and Paige Schofield of the Oval Invincibles. We've mentioned Redmayne already, but Paige really impressed me. She was standing in early on in the tournament opening for Invincibles in place of Chimaya Tapatu, scored a 50 in the opening game, and was consistently useful to Oval Invincibles with bat in hand. At 3, Nat Brunt, it'd be rude not to include the top run scorer, quite frankly. In at 4, Elise Perry, but not necessarily for her contributions on the pitch, even though they were incredible, but for the way in which she captained her side. I thought it was commendable at times, the way in which she trusted the players. Then Heather Knight, unbelievable tournament. Deepti Sharma, who we've also mentioned, probably one of the pick of the bunch from an international point of view. Jess Jonathan, so really fermenting that spin department. Eva Gray, who I think is a little bit of a curveball for London Spirit. She really impressed me. She really stood up when needed for her side, and although she wasn't necessarily at the top from a wicket-taking perspective, she kept them in a lot of games through her economic bowling. Lindsay Smith, top wicket-taker, again, would be really rude not to include her from the Northern Superchargers. Georgia Davis, another curveball, Welsh Fire. She, again, really stood up in the big moments to help out Tammy Beaumont in games which they probably shouldn't have won. And then finally, Shabnam Ismail. Her performance in that final, I think, justifies it on its own. She kept Welsh Fire in a game which they should have lost probably halfway through, and yet they took it right to the end. And then from a bench point of view, Freya Davies of the Welsh Fire, Annabelle Sutherland of Northern Superchargers, Tilly Courtine-Coleman of Southern Brave, Karis Pavley of Birmingham Phoenix, and Beth Mooney of the Manchester Originals.
So you've left out the MVP of the tournament. She's only a squad member.
I agree that she had a good tournament, but if I look at the individual factors of batting/bowling, the other players who've made my team impress me more. But you can't not include this MVP on principle, so she had to be involved somehow, hence why she's on the bench. Not only was I successful from a prediction perspective with Welsh Fire making the final, but you were too with the Southern Brave in the men's tournament.
I was, yes. Southern Brave. My 3 predictions were the Southern Brave to win the tournament. By my 2 other top 3s were the Oval Invincibles, who won the tournament, and the Trent Rockets. Less said about the Trent Rockets, but the Southern Brave actually were very lucky to get to the eliminators because they had a rained-off game, which I'm pretty confident they would have lost against the Welsh Fire. And if they'd lost that game, they wouldn't have made the eliminator. And, well, from your point of view, the eliminator, I still can't believe how they beat the Birmingham Phoenix in the eliminator.
It was quite incredible. I mean, if I'm Liam Livingston, I think I'm a tad frustrated with myself. Didn't really do what he should have done with Bat in the chase, and then got out in the super set, to correct myself. But it shows the all-round ability of Brave as a side and why you backed them to go all the way.
Yeah, and it was good to see Jofra Archer. He looked good, got 10 wickets in the tournament. Tymal Mills was the leading wicket taker in the men's tournament. Other people that stood out, in my opinion, Sam Curran got 201 runs and 17 wickets. James Vince, 424 runs, long way clear of any other batter in the tournament.
I think James Vince, for me, is one of the most underlooked cricketers in domestic cricket. I think from a batting perspective, he is one of the best in the country right now, and he proved that in the 100. I mean, Sam Curran, the highlight for me of his tournament has to be his fifer, including a hat-trick. That was pretty exceptional. And then that bowling attack is unbelievable. And then you've also got Chris Jordan in the mix. So you've got 3 pace bowlers who probably aren't your first choice, but are quickly evolving to be one of the scariest attacks in the game.
Another player that you'll know well that impressed was Jacob Bethel of the Birmingham Phoenix, now selected for the England white ball squads.
I've been watching Jacob Atwater play consistent and incredible cricket for a number of years now. So it's really nice to see him start to translate that on an international stage, in effect, of a franchise tournament. And his performances have certainly reflected. Obviously, he's got that England call up, and he also received his first BBL contract in the draft at the weekend. So in terms of one of the aims of the 100 in being to improve the domestic talent we have on hand, it's certainly achieved that.
There was a lot of talk about the ball, particularly in the men's tournament, because the scores were lower, and whether it was a shinier ball, whether it didn't lose its shine, whether the H was in the right place on the actual ball. I'd still rather prefer games with a few more runs, but I'm not one for teams scoring 200 and things like that. I'd rather see a lower scoring tight game myself than perhaps not quite as low as they were, but I'd still prefer that than 190 plays 100 and something like that.
The debate about the ball is genuinely the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard in my involvement in cricket. I don't care. The ball, it probably wasn't the ball. I think people are really underestimating the surfaces this year. The pitches in this country, especially at the top grounds, which the 100 have played at, are really struggling because they're hosting so much cricket. And it's the conditions of the pitches which are a consistent issue among county and domestic and regional cricket. It's not just in the 100. The ball is the same ball which is used in the Blast. Every ball in franchise tournaments has a logo on it, which doesn't make a difference. It makes a tiny difference, but it can't be that substantial if it didn't make at all a difference for the women's teams. That's the way of looking at it. But I agree. I think although they probably didn't score as many runs as you'd want them to, I would much rather watch a competitive, close game of cricket, which is slightly lower scoring, than have one team absolutely annihilate the other. It's better for the neutral.
In the dynamic world of programmatic ad buying, Viant is your ultimate CTV partner. Target with precision. Buy with confidence. Viant empowers you with AI-driven technology that reaches your audience where they engage most, ensuring your message hits home. And the campaign results? Transparent, thanks to Viant's advanced measurement suite. For media buyers who demand the best, Viant delivers. Viant, elevate your CTV campaign performance.
Do you know what it takes to be iconic? You are iconic. I am iconic. I love Iconic Agua. I drink Iconic Agua every day. Join the movement. Hydrate with Iconic Agua. Find Iconic Agua in all Kroger and Ralph stores across America. Because when you're thirsty, there's only one way to hydrate. And that's with the world's best tasting spring water on earth. Hydrate responsibly. Iconic Agua, where hydration meets greatness.
As to the future of the 100, any changes you would like to see in 2025?
I've got some serious ones here, and then also a couple which, just for my happiness, I would love to occur. I think the biggest serious one for me is the salary increase for the women. It needs to go up. We're reaching the point now where, compared to the other women's franchise tournaments, we're not competing. And it looks like there's going to be an American women's franchise tournament coming in a couple of years, which will clash with the 100 likely. So if that happens, we need to be competing if we want to keep drawing in the top internationals. And even taking away from that, the lower brackets, the lowest bracket in the women's tournament is £8,000. The lowest bracket in the men's tournament is £30,000. When you look at the comparison of that, it's quite significant. And the players who are earning the lowest in the women's 100 tend to be the players who either aren't professional at a regional level or on very insignificant contracts at a regional level. So given we're advertising it as one tournament, the ticket is for both games, the TV deal is for all of it, the sponsors are for both sides of the tournament, why is there such a prominent gap? The use of regional talent is another big one for me. I've really enjoyed this season seeing players, young and old, finally getting opportunities at the highest level, and the faith which has been put in them from their captains. And I'd really like that to continue. I've seen a debate recently about combining the tables for the men and women's tournaments, which is a really interesting one because it could work. And I think if you could make it work, it would make more sense to make sure that the teams are investing equally in the women's teams to the men's teams, etc. And then my little silly one to throw in the mix is obviously Compare the Market were the leading sponsors this year, and we had our Meerkat Match Heroes. And I think that it is genuinely upsetting that as part of the post-match presentations, the players were not given a stuffed meerkat. In the Vitality Blast, we've got the sausage dog, which the players get presented. And I just think Compare the Market need to up their game here. I want to be seeing stuffed meerkats awarded to all of the player of the matches and the equivalent fans.
I'll have to ask future guests whether they'd like that. I wish I'd had that before I spoke to Grace and Katie. I could have asked them that question. And I wonder what they would have said. I hadn't realised that there was a possible American tournament, and of course the MLC has taken players away from the men's 100, so potentially that could do the same with the women's 100.
Yeah, definitely. And also not just looking at the American stuff as a whole. Currently South Africa and Pakistan do not have top women's franchise tournaments. So if you think about that and you think about where they fit in the women's schedule, the international players need rest. You know, like Elise Perry can't play cricket 12 months of the year. She can't play in all these franchise tournaments and also compete for Australia. So there are going to be tournaments which they start to opt out of. And those tournaments are likely to be the ones, from their perspective, which pay the least. And the 100 doesn't compare to the BBL or the IPL currently. So it does need to catch up.
One thing we have got to look forward to, Rosa, is the Women's T20 World Cup, which begins now in the UAE on the 3rd of October with Bangladesh playing Scotland.
Yeah, definitely a boost to the cricket calendar for all women's cricket fans. I think, as you said, Scotland, that's probably my highlight. What I'm looking most forward to. It's their first participation in the World Cup. And from a women's regional cricket fan point of view, there's a lot of players from Scotland who play in our leagues. So it'll be really interesting to see how they fare on the highest level.
Scotland, of course, in the same group as England with South Africa, Bangladesh and the West Indies.
Yeah, I definitely think we've got the easy way out in the nicest way possible. We've avoided India, Australia, and New Zealand, which is quite incredible, actually. But don't get me wrong, Scotland and South Africa and the West Indies and Bangladesh, to be fair, have the potential to be very competitive. So it'll be interesting to see how we fare. I think in reality, you'd hope in that group we get out of it. If we don't, something's gone terribly wrong.
And what was your reaction to the recent England squad announcement?
I think we've got it wrong. I mean, looking at that squad, the balance is non-existent. We're taking one out-and-out pace bowler in Lauren Bell, 4 spin bowlers when we're only going to use 3 at a time. So why are you using squad place on the 4th? There's a couple of players in there who have come back from injury and haven't yet really proven themselves. And then you've got the issue of their core plan appears to be to play Natseva Brunt and Freya Kemp as pace bowlers and batters, and then have Lauren Bowd strengthen the pace attack and then play a load of spinners. Freya Kemp has really struggled to reach form again after her injury. Natseva Brunt hasn't, we still don't know if she can bowl. She stopped bowling again because of her injury. So I think, don't get me wrong, there's some talent in that squad, and every player in that squad has talent, but I don't think when you combine them together, it makes for a positive outcome.
So you think that Lauren Filer should have been selected, adding that extra pace?
Yeah, I think not even necessarily Lauren Filer. I think one of the things which has really disappointed me heading into this World Cup is not utilising the previous series to try out new players. I mean, as an example, not necessarily a new player, but Katie George, left-handed pace bowler who can bat exactly the same role as Freya Kemp, who's had an incredible domestic season and has all the form in the world and has played for England before, could have been really valuable to that squad. And there's other pace bowlers in the game, Grace Ballinger as an example, who are starting to really shine on the highest level, Grace Potts as well. I think Lauren Filer is an incredible cricketer, but I don't think she's a T20 player. I think you needed to draw in talent from elsewhere.
Prediction time now. You got to the final with the Welsh Fire. Who are your finalists then? And then a winner for the Women's T20 World Cup?
My finalists are India, who I think will beat us in the semi-final, and Australia, who I think will beat South Africa in the other final. And I'm going to go bold here, and I'm going to say that India are going to come out on top and win their first Women's World Cup.
So no, I don't know how many times in a row that Australia have won these tournaments.
Too many. I mean, they've won the last 2 for sure, but they've got a really good squad. Don't get me wrong, they always have a good squad. They're Australia, but we saw in the Ashes last year how, from a competitive point of view, it's getting easier and easier to go toe-to-toe with them. We beat them in 2 series, and India have the advantage of the conditions, and their bowlers are more adjusted to the conditions which the UAE will bring than the Aussie, English and South African bowlers. So I think from that point of view, India have an advantage, but it's whether they can absorb the pressure and go all the way.
The action starts on the 3rd of October. I'm sure you'll be watching amidst doing your studying for your A-levels, and we must catch up for a podcast about the World Cup later in the year.
Yeah, we must. Let's hope I'm wrong, and let's hope that England go all the way. I'm always happy to be proven wrong with these things, but it should be a great tournament, and I hope that everyone enjoys watching it.
And thank you again for talking about the 2024 100, and I'm sure 2025 will bring the Welsh Fire victory.
Thank you very much for having me on, and I really do hope so, because they're starting to let me down now. Back to them in 2023 when they come last the previous 2 years, and how did they repay me? So let's hope they go all the way next year.
Well, they'll be no good in the draft picks, will they?
Yeah, no. I mean, to be fair, there's so much talent available that even though they're going to have one of the latter picks in the draft, I think you can still put in some top players.
We will wait and see for 2025. Thanks again, Rosa.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.